start if you want to start. Well, I don't care. You can start. Holy cow! Start that again.
People talk a lot about breed and what breed is going to be best. And the answer is there's probably a family of dogs within any breed that can fit.
So the key is being aware that it's happening. 15 birds or so in the covey. And the covey all went to my right, and I was facing the puppies.
You can communicate to a dog right. They can learn it in one way.
Well, enjoy.
He's a jack of all trades, but a master of none. But that might be better than a master of one. So I thought that was pretty interesting, because that's how I feel. I feel like my life's been better the way it is than it would have been if I was just a master of one trade. Because I've gotten to do so many different things. And like I said, the horses, when I started out as a young kid, I'd go to the library with my mom and we would get everything that had to do with training dogs. Every bird dog training, didn't matter if it was pointing dogs, flushing dogs. I didn't care if it had dogs, I wanted it. And it was before I could read. I remember just looking at pictures. She'd get me books and I'd just look at pictures and look at pictures. And then I'd read every book I could. And any videos, as videos started to get more popular. And that's something. Now I'm talking about when videos started to get popular. That's aging me a little bit. But as I look around, it's not aging me that much more than most of you. So but anyway, so I was always fascinated with training animals, but particularly with dogs. But as I got into the stage of my life where I needed a career, I loved the horses and I loved the dogs. But as I thought about it, I liked the dogs the most. So I chose to make the horses my career so that the dogs wouldn't have to have the pressures of making a living and I could just enjoy them. And there was very little time that I was legal in my ownership of dogs. I was usually way over the numbers. And I usually would have 10 or so. And so it was my full-time job next to my full-time job, right, what I did with the dogs. And then as time went on, and I had a lot of success with the field trial dogs, the pointing dogs, in particular off horseback. And that's been a great thing for me. I also got involved in labs, and I've trained a number of labs to the master hunter level. And then I've also got involved in some springers, and I've field trialed the springers a little bit. Done a little bit of winning there some years ago. So I have a pretty broad base. And then we met our family dog, Duke. If any of you have followed us online at all, then you might know some of Duke's story. But Duke came to us as a 9-month-old puppy that was human aggressive and dog aggressive, belonged to my sister-in-law. And somehow I was nominated to try to help Duke out. And so I did, and in the process, my sister-in-law decided she wasn't a dog person, and so Duke needed a new home, and somehow he ended up being in our home. Which, if you knew my wife, that was she only asked me 2 things when we got married. One was that I'd never act like I was going to kiss her and then lick her nose instead. And the other one was that I wouldn't move any animals in the house, that the house could be her domain. And when the kids were getting older and wanted a dog, she was famous for, we've got 4 kids, and she was famous for saying, I've already got 5 animals in this house, I don't need another one. So I thought it was comical that she'd refer to herself as an animal. So anyway, this dog, the fact that it ended up in the house, that was her choice, which if you knew her, that would be amazing. And she still every day cusses the fact that dog lives in the house. But he still stays in the house, so. But he became a great part of what we did. I got a lot of references from vets once after I'd had to close down the horse business after my injury. And the vets had seen how he had changed and how he had become such a kind and gentle animal and just really a neat animal. Then he helped me a lot in our obedience classes that we do. He's getting older now, but he would help us in there. And then I started using him when I dealt with other aggressive dog cases. And he's my right-hand man. He could be there, and I knew that dog could be wanting to eat him, and I knew he would just take it calmly and patiently and not react. And so that was a great learning journey for me, to learn how to help a dog help change the way a dog perceived the world, or how they perceived they needed to act. Because they all act in a way to either avoid what they don't want or gain what they do want. But sometimes they just don't understand how humans work, and the dog things that they do don't go along with our plans, right? So we have to help that dog understand the world that lives in with us. so that its dreams can come true and our dreams can come true. And in that case, you know, he needed to feel secure and safe in his environment and believe that humans had something good to offer and that other dogs had something good to offer. So that was probably when my way of training changed. And it changed in the horses and it changed in the dogs. And I went from thinking about trying to control their physical actions to trying to train their mind, because the physical actions always follow the mind. But just because we're demanding a certain physical action does not mean that we have the mind in the place that it needs to be to really be successful. And we see that anytime we have an animal that we feel like we're fighting with or we're arguing with. Right? I want it this way, but you want it that way. And when we find that we're butting heads, and those are the times we feel like maybe we need to use a little bit more force or be a little bit more demanding, what that's telling us is that our view is different than their view. But I realize that if I can figure out how to help their view become the same as my view, now they're going to do it in a desire to gain all that they think they want, right? So that's why I refer to it as making dogs' dreams come true, is because if they can think that doing what I'm asking them to do is the only wise thing to do because that's how they're successful getting what they want, then that's when we're going to have a dog that is very dependable in its actions because it's actually doing them for himself, not for you. They just happen to be right. It just happens to be right along with what you want as well. And so that was a big changing point. I remember I had a mentor in the horses that would always say, "We're training their mind, not their body." And so I think that in the back of my mind is a lot of what kind of switched me that way. And probably some with what I went through with my mind after the accident, that, you know, seeing how the way you view the world can change and experiencing a lot of change in those views. Anyway, so that's what I'm big about now. And that's what, you know, the last 5 or 6 years, that's what all my focus has been on is learning to be able to shape. We refer to it as shaping the dog's mind, so that I get a companion that works along with me and that we both have the same goals in mind and both understand how we benefit from each other. So that's what I want to kind of talk about today. But rather than just going on and talking about things that maybe you guys, I mean, I could stand up here and talk about, you know, aggressive dog cases. I could talk about dogs that, you know, won't honor a point of another dog, or we could talk about dogs that refuse to retrieve, or we could talk about, you know, but I felt like if I just picked something, then I might be talking to you guys about a lot of what you just aren't even interested in. So first of all, how many of you, I guess everybody runs a dog in their hunting? Is there anybody that's dogless? Dogless, so maybe, you look real familiar. Have we met?
Somewhere.
In the horses?
Got that brain problem.
Oh, do you?
Traumatic brain injury.
Oh, I keep looking, thinking, man, somewhere I'm going to put my finger on why you look so familiar. But well, if you're dealing with the same problem, you and I, we might just get to meet again for the first time, the second time.
Or the third.
Yeah, it could be. Who knows? That's the great thing, is I can finish a book, and if I just give it a day or two, I can start over again. It's fantastic, and it's just as enjoyable the second time as the first time. So, how many of you have pointing dogs? Anybody with flushing or retrieving dogs? All right, labs, springers, what are you?
German Shorthair German Shorthair Lab.
A German Shorthair Lab, but it's chosen the lab side of things.
It's bipolar.
Yeah. Well, I've had some German Shorthairs and some pointers and some some setters, and they thought they were half lab or half Springer or something, because some of them thought they were all Springer. I've had a few that it was a long time before they thought slowing down might be of value, and stopping, that was a long ways off. But very good. So mostly pointers in here. So we could probably head a little bit more the pointing direction, and everybody could be happy. What are some of the biggest challenges you guys find with your dogs?
Chasing birds.
Yeah, so one thing, and I'm not the most consistent trainer. I mean, I'm balancing profession, kids, and all that stuff. But especially during the bird season, it's really hard keep the training wheels on while you're trying to chase birds. But
And harvest birds.
Yeah, so I've got a dog. She honors when she first sees the other dog on point, and then I've got about maybe 5 seconds, and then she wants to get in front. And
Yeah.
I've been putting her back and trying to use the moments in the field that we're hunting to just looking for some advice on how to mix all that together.
Right. Great. Great. I think we can do a lot with that. We had another comment over here.
I just said chasing birds.
Okay.
My dog he'll pull points quite often, but quite often if he gets too excited, he gets, especially if there's more than one bird.
Oh yeah.
And he's gone. He's
Great.
Going.
Multiple bird triggers.
Yeah.
That
he'll
visual. How about if he sees them running, sees them moving ahead of him,
Yeah.
hears them going through the grass?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If he doesn't see him, he'll hold it. But if he sees him, he's
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, very good. Anybody else? What other challenges do people have? I'm logging these, and then we're going to have some conversations. It'll be good.
I've got a couple issues. One, they're covering too much ground too quick,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think a big part of that's my fault for not getting them out as often. And then another one is, okay, I'm trying to send them this way, and they won't respond to me trying to send them this way or that way or back.
Yeah. When you're sending them on a retrieve, or when you're sending them to hunt an area?
Sending them to either. Really.
Either one.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, I can send them to hunt an area really easy, but to go a certain way for a retrieve is, I'm having a hard time with that.
Right. They might think they have a better idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do I
That's-
get my idea? Same
Yeah. How do you make their, yeah. How do you get their idea to be the same as yours, right? Yeah. Because they do. That's a big thing, right? They start believing they're maybe a little smarter than us.
Yeah.
And sometimes they are. I gotta admit. Sometimes when it comes to bird dogging, they have more knowledge than me, right? And that knowledge in them being the bird expert, and then us still having a leadership role is kind of a tough challenge. And controlling their actions that they're taking so that we can get done what we want to get done can be a real challenge, right? Because they already think they know what they might try to get done the way that they want to get it done. And so, so then we start running in. Those are the spots that we start butting heads, and we start thinking, man, maybe I just need to be a little firmer, a little bit more demanding. And I don't want to. So in the dog world, when you get online, you start talking in the pet world or exploring the pet world, there's this purely positive movement. Is anybody familiar with that? And they want to talk about just the rewards that they give, right? A lot of it's treat driven, food rewards. And they want to talk purely positive. Let's just lure the dog into doing the things. Let's make it so good to do the things that we want it to do that it wouldn't even think about doing the things we don't want it to do. And sometimes I've found people misinterpreting what I'm saying as being that same thing. Helping make the dreams come true. It's such a positive level. Sometimes I'll get people like, this guy, he never shows discipline. It's always about just the purely positive. Well, the purely positive movement, to me, has been a fantastic movement in that it's just like when somebody figured out that they could become pretty good with their left hand in basketball if they just tied their right hand behind their back, right? And it helped make them very good with their left hand, and they realized that opened a lot of doors, right? But to be a great basketball player, they still have to keep their other hand. They have to untie that other hand in the end. That can help develop, but in the end, you're going to be the best basketball player if you can play with both hands equally, right? And whenever that hand fit best for the situation. And that's what I want. That's how I think of myself. I look at the purely positive side of things, and I love how deep it's taken us into the dog's mind and just how much power there is in the reward. Because there's a huge amount of power. The reward is way more powerful than just the ramifications of not doing it right. Right? And we all know that because we've got dogs that we've disciplined. We've told them, by dang, you can't do it that way, And if you do, you're going to be in trouble. And then we find they still do it the way that they wanted to do it, right? That's because the reward that they perceive is so powerful that it's more powerful than anything you could do to me, right? So we see the power of that. So that's a key thing to recognize, because that's where the answer is. It's always in helping the dog get the reward it's looking for, but sometimes we just have to teach it there's a better route than what it's taking. And if we talk about a dog chasing, then that's exactly what we're dealing with, right? The dog's like, hey, I want to get the bird, you know? And so he's chasing it, and he's like, oh, the adrenaline rush, chasing is awesome. You know, so how do you get them to stop chasing? And the answer would be you have to help them think that something else is more awesome. But if they already believe that chasing's really awesome, you know, how do you make that switch? And that's what I'm all about, is figuring out how to make that switch. So I think if we go back and we just start from the beginning of a pointing dog, I think we'll come up with some answers for these things. For the dog that doesn't honor, for the dog that chases a lot, and the dog that maybe doesn't take your direction. Right? So we created a website that's teasdoghouse.com, and what it is a subscription website. So you go there, it's a subscription video library, I guess, and we have over 200 videos in there now. We started this a couple years ago, and that'll continue to grow. We got ideas for videos that is endless, but in there we start with a program that's called Shaping of the Mind, and we take the puppies and we teach them to sit and to lie down and to get onto things and off of things, and they do it for a food reward, and we start getting that mind to start to look to us and say, you might have an answer, you might be able to help me get what I want, and right now I want that piece of food, right? And so I show them how to do the things that I want. For instance, with the small bird dog puppies, I have these tires, and with a wood top on them, I just put a piece of wood right on top of them, cut it round like the tire. And
Hey, Shannon, just a second, you could pull down the screen and then there's a light switch over here. Turn off those front lights.
yeah,
We can put Talmage more in the dark.
I spend a lot of time in the dark, I tell you that. So this is our bird dog stuff, and we have the first cycle, the second cycle, and the third cycle. So we go through these different stages as we bring these dogs along, right? What I wanted to talk about real quick with the direction is when they're little puppies, you know, we usually start about 6 weeks, they're big enough to start cruising the shop and going to the tires, and I'll start walking to the tire, and you can see right here, working in the tires, and I'll start walking to the tire, and I'll put a little food on the tire, and they'll get up there and eat the food, and then I'll go to another tire and I'll put a little food on that tire, and pretty soon they think the tire is the best place to be, right? It gives them a target. And then I'll walk and I'll face this tire, and all the puppies will go get on that tire. And then I'll just turn and face this tire, and then I find out what puppies, how smart they are, how quick they're learning, right? And pretty soon one of them will be like, I think I'm on the wrong tire. And he'll come running over and he'll hit this tire, and I'll say, yes, that's it, and I'll feed the treat. And pretty soon I can stand in the middle of the tires and just turn, and whatever tire I face, the whole swarm of puppies goes to that tire and jumps on that tire, right? So right from the beginning, they're starting to realize that what's in front of me, that's where the payday is. The payday's in front of me, right? If they're retrieving dogs, the labs, then way before they're ready to follow my hand signals for a bumper, I could be saying, get over here. And then they get on that tire and I'll feed them. Or I'll send them to this tire over here. I'll send them back to that tire back there. And they're little, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12. I play that usually till they're about 14 weeks old, because then I've got them fully vaccinated, right? And now the world opens up and I can safely go other places. So I do that all in the shop, and they learn lots of body language. They learn what my hand signals mean. They learn what the direction I'm facing or walking means. And they start picking up. And most of all, they start saying, this guy, he's brilliant. Anytime I got a problem, I'm going to look to him because he can help me figure it out. He can help my dreams come true. Right? And that's the mentality I want have these dogs learning. Then as we go through the first cycle, so we're in the...
This is first cycle.
Yeah. So then as we go into the field, we have some tires set up out there in the field too, and for the first few days we'll go to those tires, and I'll go to the tire, and then I'll set my bird over here, right? So I turn off the tire and I put that puppy right into the wind, into the bird. And so I go to the tire, And I might go to a couple tires, and then I'll turn and I'll start walking straight towards the bird. And the puppies are just like, hey, get in front of this guy, and boom, all of a sudden they're in the bird. And then I replace the tires with birds. And now when I'm walking to my bird plant spots, and I'm walking to my bird plant spots, and this dog just learns that wherever he's facing, get there. And that translates for me off horseback, that translates 800 yards, right? And I can make a turn and sing to a dog and just watch them cross the front and hit the new place that I want to go. But that begins when they're little, and it begins teaching the dog to believe that what it wants is in front of me. That's where it's going to find it, is out the front. So that's an example of shaping the mind, and that's an example also of where we go to start getting them to be believers. And you can just replace, you have your targets, and you just replace those targets from tires to whatever the target is, right? If I was running a lab, I might have a bumper over here and a bumper over here and a bumper back there, right? And maybe I've got these two out and I don't have one here, and he's running for that one, and I stop him and he turns around and looks at me, and then I throw one over here and I send him over there. Until pretty soon I can send him, I can stop him, and I can send him any direction I want, and he knows that whatever direction I just gave him is where he's going to get what he's looking for. Right? So I build those situations at home, and I build those situations in the training so that when I get into the field, he's already a believer. He's already a believer in me, and if I stop him and say, this is where I need him, or if we're hunting here, and I think, I need to go over here, then I got a dog that's going to key off of where I'm facing and believe already that that's a really good idea, is to get in front of where I'm facing. Does that answer some questions about those things?
What if you didn't do that when they were
That's a great question. So if we went back to the shaping of the mind, I'll show you what we have going on here. I mean, that's a fabulous question. So if we go into the shaping of the mind here, that boxer that's Duke, the dog I was telling you about that was human and dog aggressive. But we've got the adult basics and we've got the puppy basics. And you just do the same thing in both of them. Right? But we set it up this way for two reasons. Number one, in the adult basics, sometimes when you get an adult dog, it doesn't have the same food drive as a puppy. Right? Most puppies, when they're puppies, they get pretty amped up about just the kibble that you feed them. So instead of feeding 2 meals like we normally would with a puppy, I might take the morning meal and just put it in my little treat bag, and that's what I use. And then when it's gone, then I get the evening meal, and as long as they get that food spread out through the day, it doesn't matter if it came, a few kibbles at a time all day long, or if it came in a little training exercise right before I went to work, and then the rest was in a bowl, and then in the evening I do a little bit, and then the rest is in a bowl, right? It gives me a lot of, but man, that treat is powerful to a little puppy. That piece of food can really motivate a puppy. A lot of times with an adult dog, that motivation isn't the same, right? You could get out to the field and you'd be like, sit. And they'd be like, no, birds. It's all about the birds, right? And now all of a sudden our little treat just doesn't have much motivation to the dog. And so that's one of the reasons why we did an adult and a puppy basic. But the other reason is because when people come in, they have an adult dog, and so they'll think, well, I'm already past the puppy stage. Or else they have a puppy and they think, well, the adult stuff won't work for me because I have a puppy. But the puppy and the adult's brains work the same. And so I go back and I just start doing the things with the adult dog, and you'll watch their brain just start to wake up. I get that with the basics. This isn't bird dog stuff. This is any dog stuff. And a lot of people say, oh, I don't want my pointer, I don't teach my pointer to sit. And I don't teach my pointer to lay down. And that's just not me. I teach them all to sit and to lay down, and I just don't ever have trouble with it. Because they understand what it's about, and they don't ever have a reason when they're pointing a bird to sit or lay down. We could talk about that too, because there's no pressure. There's no pressure when they're pointing a bird. So which is the next thing I want to talk about, because that goes along with the chasing and also with the not honoring. Because not honoring is just early chasing, in the dog's mind. And so
I think with that same question of addressing adult dogs versus puppies, specifically with the bird dogs, where it's the same thing, that in the basics courses we cover the same things in the puppy and the adult version. And with a adult bird dog, you might not have the same food drive where you can do the tire drills, But in the training fields, you can easily set up, if you have a field that's sterile, meaning no wild birds, you can make sure that the only place they ever find birds is in front, you know? And so then you can do the same type of a thing using a reward the birds that they're interested in. If they're not interested in the reward, we might use with the puppies. And so, yeah, just kind of setting up the same type of things, just using different rewards can be really the difference between adults and dogs.
And recognizing that the reward can be whatever the dog wants. Right? My reward can be getting in the truck. If the dog's dying to get in the truck, that's a great reward for doing what I want to have you do. And then I'll just let you know that because you did what I wanted you to do, now you get to get in the truck or go out to use the bathroom or go to hunt in the field or any of those things. The reward becomes whatever it wants. It might start as a food morsel, but it becomes whatever you want. So that's a great point. So in the field, you know, you just set it up as bird plants. We train in a sterile field. When I'm doing my training, I want a field where we're not going to accidentally come across a pheasant or something. I would love habitat that looks like it. And out where we are, out by the lake, I mean, there's a lot of habitat out there that they're never going to find a bird in. So, well, and it's not great at habitat or they would find a bird in it. So I guess we could have a whole discussion about habitat. But the places down there that they used to find birds, but so anyway, that's where we'll work, and we'll work with pigeons because then we have full control of knowing the dog is not going to find it unless it's where I want it to be. And then it'll just become a believer that that's where it's at. And then when I go out into the wild birds, you know, I have that connection. But so another thing we could talk about with the questions is how we view the pointing experience for a dog. Right? Because we all have puppies, they go getting the birds, we want to get them excited about the bird, right? And so when do they get some of the, what do you think the puppy gets the most enjoyment out of when it comes to birds? What's your, okay, smelling the bird? I definitely think that there's something there because they love to smell the bird.
Yeah, in the mouth, it seems to be breeds I love.
Getting a hold of a bird, getting a bird in their mouth. Very good. Does anybody have a dog that they don't think is very high on getting a bird in its mouth?
Well, my current dog doesn't love to retrieve. She'll pick it up, but doesn't want to hold it for very long. I think, especially young dogs, find lots of joy in cheese.
Okay.
Once that bird gets up, I mean, they want to go.
Yeah. 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 I think those are the three top things that I've ever seen, right? Some dogs seem to love to get the bird in their mouth. I can't list that one as one of the top desires for pointing dogs because there's many pointing dogs that don't care to have a bird in their mouth, right? Especially when you get into the world that I compete in a lot, that horseback world, because we don't ever shoot a bird for the dog in competition, there's not any, I mean, a lot of those guys, you ask them and they're like, I've never thrown something for my dog. Why on earth would I have, you know? And then the idea that, well, if it never retrieved it, then it won't chase it so hard. And so there's these things, right? So I know that there's a big element of some of the hardest hunting and best bird dogs I've ever been around that just never retrieved a bird in their whole life. So then I think, okay, but for some dogs, without a doubt, getting that bird in their mouth seems to really be a huge plus, right? But as a universal thing, I don't know if it's half and half, but I do know that it's not the only thing that creates the drive because I've been around a lot of dogs with a ton of drive that have, don't put that dry feathers in my mouth and I can't breathe to run across the hill again, you know? How on earth will I run away if I have feathers in my mouth? But so, yeah, but definitely a lot of dogs, that's a huge, huge plus. The scent. There's something about pointing that dogs, something about that. There's some kind of fix there. I don't know what it is, but it's their drug, right? I've had dogs that never retrieved. I didn't kill them birds, but boy, they would literally run themselves to death in the pursuit of birds. So that's a huge plus. I guess we could say on the other end, I've also had dogs that loved the bird in the mouth that sure didn't seem like they cared much about it, you know, about pointing the bird. They wanted to smell it, but maybe they were short on point and high on retrieve drive. And so I guess there's variances, but definitely there's something about being on point that those dogs fall in love with, and they love the reward of pointing a bird. And then definitely we've all seen that the chase can be addicting, right? They can really love that chase. So what causes the dog to go on point? Why does a puppy first go on point?
Just instinct, isn't it? Just nature.
Something in it that said, oh, freeze. Yeah. How often have you seen the little puppy at first, it chases it and it's interested in it. You get it used to that bird, you know, you introduce the bird, you throw the bird, the puppy chases it, they get excited. Then they're running along and they're like, what is that? And then boom, off flies the bird, right? I have seen a few dogs that had so much point that the first time they whiffed a bird, they just locked up and they were just locked up, right? Most of them, though, they're going to see a few fly before they get the idea that maybe they want to lock up. And a lot of the ones that locked up early, as their confidence gets up and as they get it in their mouth a little bit, or as they chase it a little bit, then all of a sudden they'll bust through that desire to lock up and then they'll start chasing. But those puppies, they all have a point when they know that bird's getting away. So then that point comes in, they smell. The next thing that's going to happen is the bird's going to fly. So to try to prevent the flight of the bird, I'm going to freeze and I'm going to lock up. All right? Does that make sense? Can we all kind of get on that page that they start trying to creep and lock up and get pointing in an effort to prevent the bird from flying. But as they get bigger and they get stronger and they get faster, they can fall in love with that chase, right? And sometimes that chase overpowers that desire to point. We all seen that? But I think that if we just broke it down and said a dog loves two things the very most, or the broadest number of dogs love two things the most, that's chasing and pointing. That's the way my mind works. I look at those two things and I think that's their favorite thing to do is to either point it or chase it. So what I want to do is I want to help build on that natural thought process that if I freeze, I can keep it from flying, right? That's what I want. And so as I start these puppies, I build the desire and I build this love for the bird. I love little puppies catching birds. You know, when they're little, I like them to be on them and chase them. Some of the meanest dogs on birds became the greatest bird dogs in the end because they learned so much. Every time they followed those things and rooted them out, their brain was just like, how far ahead of me is it? Is it moving? Is it here? Is this where it used to be, or is this where it still is? Is this? And they're computing all this stuff, and sometimes I'm back there just, my mind's going nuts because you're almost a year old, and I can't even, you know, and you're just, all it seems like you want to do is root them out and make them fly. And then all of a sudden they start pointing, and man, some of those have become my most amazing wild bird dogs because they learned how to take them on the run. They learned how to get them pinned, right? I have one dog, T's Nickelback. We did a video a bunch of years ago. It's actually when Tanner was young and he shot his first chucker. It's called Nick Ledged Out, I think, on YouTube. And it's, but he's standing on a cliff and he'd been working these running chucker up above, and we'd seen him pointed, and then he'd move and point, move and point, and we were quite a ways away when it all started. And so as we were going, this was after, not too long after I'd hit my head real hard, and I wasn't handling firearms at the time, so I was just running the camera, and my boys were with me, and they were getting to do the shooting. And so I set up on the hill and filmed him, and these chuckers ran down, and they went down the draw, and he went out on the cliffs. And then he realized they were below him, and he just went on point. And they were like 60 feet below him at the bottom of the cliffs, and he was standing up there just pointing at the top of the cliffs. And so Tanner went down and flushed him out of the bottom and shot a bird. And it's just a fun piece of work, and I happened to get it on camera. But that dog he was a renegade as a young dog, and he thought different mountain ranges were where he wanted to hunt than where I was, and he was a handful. But all that time he was busting and chasing, and he's one of the best chucker dogs I think we've had probably still to this day. And I think a lot of that was learned while I was back there boiling mad because I was seeing the birds coming off the top of the hill 500 yards away, and I didn't feel like I could do anything about it. But he learned a lot, and then he'd do amazing things like we filmed him one time going up a ridge too, and he was He was following, and you knew they were running uphill, and he was staging with them, and he'd move, and he'd stop, and he'd move. And then he just bailed out and ran this big loop, went over the top, and then the Garmin went off. And we hiked 300, 400 yards up in there, and he was standing them. And he was standing them with the wind to his tail, right? So, I mean, those things would just make me scratch my head. I'd be like, ah, I mean, you got him pointed, he's not smelling them, the wind's blowing right up his tail, but he knows they're there, and you walk out, and they're right in front of him where you want them, and flush him. And so he taught me a lot because he was really a brilliant bird dog, but I think a lot of that was learned while he was putting those birds in the air. So I stopped hating the fact that my puppy was putting the birds in the air because I knew he was learning. But what I did want to do is figure out, but how do I make it better to get him pointed than it is to chase him? I think a lot of times the methods of training that a lot of us have used, including myself for so many years, was to try to control that physical situation. And so I'd teach the dog to whoa, and I'd be like, you wait, you little bugger. And I remember going to the points, whoa, 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 you know, hustling up in there, and then he's holding back the tide, and then the bird goes up, and boom, and he's off, and then if they like to get the bird in their mouth, they got that bird in their mouth, and they're happy as can be, and they retrieve it to you. So if we look at that, where was all the pressure in that scenario? When was he receiving pressure from me? When he was doing what? Pointing or chasing? Yeah, when he was pointing. That's when he was feeling the pressure from me, the negative pressure to hold him back. And then when did that pressure release? When the bird went. Because now I wasn't worried about him at all. The bird went up, I shot the bird, he got his reward. So can you see how we get a little bit of a mixed up signal there? And now that dog's starting to think, I have to point, but I want that bird in the air. Now eventually, if we hold that long enough and we force that dog to stay back, then he will realize, if I put him in the air, or sometimes he'll realize, if I put him in the air and the hunter's not out there, nothing comes of it. But if I wait long enough for him to get there, he'll shoot that bird and I can get it in my mouth. But what about the dog that doesn't even want it in his mouth anyway? You just took and tainted his favorite thing in the whole world, which is getting to point that bird. And you just tainted it by yelling whoa, which he knows is a force thing to make him stand still, and you robbed him of some of that best time. So some dogs in extreme cases are just going to ditch you because they'd just rather do it without you. Right? Maybe some of you guys have seen those kind. I've experienced those kind.
So I got a dog from Scott Evans a few years ago. That if he couldn't see you, he'd bust a bird every time.
Yeah.
And that he ran the field trials with him all the time. He lost a few trials because of it.
Yeah.
And so, how do you stop a dog from when he gets out of sight? He knows, okay, I don't have to hunt for you anymore.
Yeah.
I'm hunting for myself. Screw you.
Yeah. So now you're talking my language, right? Because off horseback, when you got these dogs that, 600 yards, there's a lot can happen out 600 yards, that you're not going to be there to help at all. And so very common problem in the big running dogs, because they are far enough away that they can figure out, if he's not around, I get to do whatever I want. And especially if when he is around, he's a pain in the butt because he won't let me move when I think I need to move, right? So then he's going to be like, hey, the key is get away from that guy.
So an issue I'm still having is, so when I'm out here up in the swamps, if he's on the other side of the bushes, and he knows I can't see him, he'll bust. And so, how would you correct something like that when the dog knows, hey, you're not paying attention to me, I'm going to do what I want.
Yeah.
I'm hunting for myself, I'm not hunting for you.
So in my mind, like we just talked about, he's a perfect example of that, right? He's saying pointing's not really what it's all about. It's not even as much fun for me anymore. Maybe because he was so addicted to the chase, but maybe also because the pointing wasn't that fun because that's when somebody was hollering at him and watching him and keeping their thumb on him, right? So he's out of balance. He thinks the bird in the air is even better than the bird on the ground. And what I want to try to build from a puppy up is that the bird on the ground has way more benefits than the bird in the air, right? I want him in love with pointing. So with the dog like that that's farther down the road, we still want to do the same thing as a puppy. We want to start to take away what's happening when the bird's flying. That's where we want to shift any pressure, is to the bird flying, not the bird on the ground. And we want to remove the pressure from the bird on the ground, right? So in those situations, I'm going to, without whoa, so when I take my puppies through, the first cycle is getting a puppy to where it's going to stand, let me get in front, shoot the bird. At that point, I don't teach whoa. So I don't teach whoa until the second cycle, which is after the first hunting season in general. Depending on when the puppy's born, right, and what my work schedule is and my time frame, I don't want to be out there with a 3-month-old puppy, 4-month-old puppy, 5-month-old puppy yelling whoa. And I'm going to hunt with somebody that's yelling whoa most likely. So I just don't even teach the word whoa, because I don't want any negative in there. If that puppy's running and chasing and enjoying the birds, I don't want it thinking it's in trouble for that until after it's fallen in love with pointing. So the way I create a situation where I can help keep the puppy from loving the chase and build the puppy's love for pointing, when I'm not really sure when it's going to start pointing, those wild birds, especially the pigeons, controlled situation might be easier for a lot of dogs. The wild birds, they're moving, stuff's changing, it's so much more exciting. So I'm going to run those puppies, and I just teach the recall. And when I'm working birds out of the launchers, I just free run into them. I don't do much, if any, work with the check cord until the puppy's, in that 9-month range. I might use it a little bit to get it into a scent cone, and as soon as the dog's got the scent, I just drop the cord. Right? So I say that because I really don't do anything while that dog's in the scent cone. While it's searching, while it's in the scent cone, I don't do anything until birds are flying. But once birds are in the air, I'm going to pull that puppy off the bird. I'm going to keep it from thinking that that bird is a great thing out past the kill zone, right? I don't know if any of you saw it, and I think there's only 5 people that follow me on YouTube, so I bet that one of those 5 isn't in this room. But but we did a little podcast thing on YouTube, and we talked about the zones. So you have the scent zone when the dog's smelling the bird, and then you have the kill zone when the bird is in the air but the bird is in range to shoot, and then you have the flyaway zone where that it's gone, right? And when I get puppies in the flyaway zone, that's where I start to draw them back. And I start doing that when a puppy's chasing a bird. It's got the adrenaline rush and the focus is highest when the bird's closest. As the bird gets farther and farther away, then the puppy starts to give up, and all that adrenaline starts to come down. And then the puppy, we've all watched this, then the puppy's like, that one got away, maybe there's another one, right? And it returns to the scene of the crime, and it checks out to see if there's another one. So I make sure there's another one, right? So as that puppy's getting old enough that it's into this, and it's chasing, and it's big enough and developed enough that it's getting some stuff pointed, but it's still chasing, then I just start calling. As soon as I see that energy start to taper, I start calling. And when they get back to me, I have a little whistle, which is my hunt whistle. If I want them to really focus on an area, if I got a bird down with a young puppy, I'll convert that to dead bird often to help the dog hunt dead, but I'll blow the whistle, and that means there's a bird in here, right? So I'll call the dog back, and as the dog comes in, because it wants to come check the scene of the crime anyway, it's natural, so I start speaking, and it comes in, and I make sure there's another bird there. And then I just cut that shorter and shorter, not with pressure, not with an e-collar, but just with my voice. Sometimes I'll even pull a bird out of my bag and whoop, whoop, whoop. They're familiar with that from being little puppies playing with a bird on a stick, but they'll come running back in for that bird, and then I'll throw that bird, and then they'll go to chase it, and I'll call them back, and then I'll put them into another bird that might be planted, and just produce multiple birds. And pretty soon the dog, it's going to run for the distance of that kill zone, but then it's going to be like, maybe there's another one. And if you repeat that enough in that first year, they'll get to where they can be on point, and that bird goes, and I can go, whoop, 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 and they'll be like, oh, boom, they're on the next bird, and then they're standing like a broke dog, but they're standing like a broke dog because that one's getting away, but I think there might be another one in the bush. Does that make sense? So I have built the desire to point while I've taken away the desire to chase. And then once I've collared, when they're old enough and I've collar conditioned, then I'll reinforce. And when I'm in wild birds, if they're headed out to chase that one to the next county, I shut that down. And I get them back, and then I just put them into another bird. And pretty soon they're just like, chasing's for the birds, right? Forget the chasing. We don't need that anymore. So to answer your question with all that background, that's where I would go. Now I also break them, I woe break, and then I teach them to stop with the belly collar because it avoids any kind of confusion, that they feel the stimulation on their neck and they think they need to come back to me if I want them to just stop and stand where they are.
Talmage, you might want to explain, make sure everybody knows what woe break is. Maybe everybody doesn't.
Yeah, that's a good question. So woe breaking, essentially, that's a term that's been brought up, but it's essentially teaching your dog to come to a stop when I say woe. And I say come to a stop because we focus a lot on staying still. But staying still in my training isn't important. But getting stopped again is really important, right? And so I'm not trying to keep them from moving to flush the bird. And when you watch my stuff, I've had a lot of people, why do you let your dogs creep so much? But it just always goes away once they stop wanting to put the bird in the air themselves. But if I get in the middle of creeping and I stop creeping, it's okay when I've got the bird planted and I know where the bird is, but once I'm out in the wild birds, how do I know what's going on? That dog's pointing. I don't know if the bird was there 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, if it's there but it's running out. But what if the dog starts going, I don't think the bird's here anymore. And he starts wanting to move, and I'm like, no, whoa, let me kick around in that grass where a bird isn't. Why don't you stand there while I do that? And then we get problems with false pointing or, those kinds of things that can be a challenge. And so I love my young dogs to move their feet. I want them to feel free to move their feet. But when that bird goes in the air, we're shutting the game down until they realize that I don't want to move my feet to put the bird in the air, but I'm going to move my feet to pin the bird. I'm going to move my feet to stay with the bird. And so that's another place that things are a little bit different. And in the end, it all cleans up really good for shoot to retrieve or anything else. The shoot to retrieve people, they take away points if your dog's moving once it's established point. But in the end, you can clean that up real easy. But in the beginning, if you want a great bird dog, I believe they need to be able to move their feet to really figure out what that, especially pheasants, I mean, those are running little animals, as you guys know, and sometimes with a pointing dog, you can just spend all day just tap and then go in and flush and go back and tap and so I like to let them move their feet. That's when you see the ones that learn how to get down around them and pin them back to you, and some of those things that some of the brilliant ones learn happen. So I just got off on that little tangent. Anyway, so woe breaking is teaching the dog to come to a stop, to stop moving its feet and then remain stationary until I get to them or until I release them. So when I refer to woe breaking, so in the dog that wants to still put birds in the air, I like to start with the belly collar, that I can stop them with the belly collar. But anytime birds go up, when I didn't put the bird up, I'm going to stop them. And when I walk in and flush, I'm not going to hold them back. I'm going to let them go with me, right? But if they're the ones that come with me and they put the bird up, I'm going to stop them. But if they'll stand there and let me put the bird up, I'm going to kill that bird for them. And then when they're off and I see birds fly, once I have them conditioned real well with that belly collar, if they're in the area and I see birds fly, I'm stopping them. Every time, I'm just going to shut that down. There's going to be no chase. Once they understand that concept real well, I can also be more demanding. I can make it a little bit more uncomfortable for them when that bird flies. But you don't want to do that too early because you don't want the discomfort of the bird flying to cause the dog to say, never mind, I just won't find birds, right? So that's where the development stage, you got to know you got a dog that's hooked on finding them and understands the reward of you getting there and shooting them. And then you can start to say, oh, you messed up there, buddy. And then we've done with the dogs that get that trick, and they in the ravines, we've set things up with guys sitting with the collar up on the hill where they can see and the handler down. All kinds of things to try to get some corrections when they're not with you, and that can be a huge challenge. But that's how I handle that. Does that answer your question? Yeah, very good. So we are 8 o'clock. I told you it wouldn't be hard to go an hour. I knew it wouldn't be. Is there any other, before I didn't want to just get off on any other tangents, but is there any other questions that have come up as we've gone through this?
Do you think beeper collars can injure a dog's hearing?
I think they could injure my hearing, so if they were that close to me. So I don't have any experiences where I say, yeah, I know that I've messed up a dog's hearing, but I worry about those sounds. I like the sound to tell me where they're at. I got a friend that runs pointers, and his have their built-in beeper. They just bark every little bit while they're out there hunting, and so I don't think that hurts their ears. But so I don't know, but I've wondered that same thing. Depending on how they used to have the hawk scream used to be real popular, and man, that's piercing and loud, and their hearing more sensitive than mine. I think that could be problematic, you know. Yeah, I've loved the Garmin. I think the Garmin's changed hunting a lot. I think a lot of times we just follow the Garmin, you know, and it tells us a lot. But yeah, I've wondered about that. I think that a lot of the electronics, it's easy to, we get excited about stuff, but there's a lot of great parts of dog training, I think, that were lost. The experience, lost with the electric collar, lost with the Garmin, lost with the, you know, the focus of knowing where your dog is and how they're hunting and how they're applying themselves, how they're using the wind, how they're, you know, a lot of that stuff that I think is just so special with your dog can be lost in the electronics and but on the other side of that, there's a lot that's been, you know, made a lot easier with the electronics too. I had a dog, a good buddy of mine, Rich Robertson, a great mentor, and he ran the all-age field trial circuit, you know, from coast to coast and had a lot of success. But he told me, he said, I think everybody should have to train dogs with no electronics before they're ever allowed to have the electronics, because we get leaning on them so much, you know. A good friend of mine, Sergio Velez up in Canada, he still does all his bird work, no electronics. He doesn't use an e-collar in anything except handling the dogs that runs, but all his bird work training is done without electronics. Yeah, pretty interesting. Any other questions?
You feel like clickers are helpful?
Yeah, what I love is the positive marker. The positive marker is so amazingly powerful, and when I talk about a positive marker, it's just a way to tell the dog that was the right thing, right? So a verbal positive marker would be yes, or good boy, or that a boy, that'll do. You know, those kinds of things are positive markers. It's how we tell our dog that it did the right thing. That's what a clicker is, right? But the thing is, when we're working with our dogs, is timing means everything. And so if I say good boy, you know, if I ask the dog to do something and I say good boy, well, good boy is pretty long. And so that word might not help pinpoint the exact thing I was looking for. So if I'm working on real fine detail, when I need a real exact, that's it. That's exactly what I was looking for. A clicker is about as quick as you can get, right? Just mark that spot. Boom, that's exactly what I was looking for. A lot of other things, a good boy or yes, you know, those kinds of things. Good, yes, that's going to be marker enough. It'll work great for us. So yeah, I love the clicker in situations. I love the positive marker. I think we should all be very aware of purposefully building certain cues to let that dog know that's exactly what we wanted, whether it's a clicker or a verbal. Sometimes it's tough to have the leash in your hand and the treat in your hand and the clicker and the, you know, and so then it gets real problematic when you're working with a puppy, so then I'll use verbal cues. But yeah, but I am a fan of all those things because they really do help a dog understand exactly when it did what we were looking for.
So one thing, just to add on to your clicker, one thing that I've heard of a lot of guys, especially when they start with clickers around the field, is they're actually using their beeper for positive reinforcement. So when that dog's on point doing good, it's like saying, hey, good boy, here's a beep.
Yeah.
And so that way you use that beeper for more of a positive reinforcement than a negative.
Yeah.
So that way the dog knows, hey, I'm doing good out here.
Yeah.
It's just a little off-leash training.
Yeah, on that, when we were talking about collars, real interesting thing I've realized, and I've dealt with, because I've got such a broad spectrum of things that I've done. You know, I've had to collar condition Great Danes and Rottweilers and pit bulls, and you know, our boxer, the bully breeds, and then the little tiny dogs. You know, a little 10-pound dog, and I've used the electronics on a lot of dogs, and the scariest thing for those dogs is always the beeper and the vibrate. Like, you'll hit vibrate and that dog will hit the back wall. It'll spin. It'll be like, what in the world just hit me? I can take, like, I use the dog collars because they have so much variance. I mean, you can go really, really, really low. or as high as you need to, and you can do it in just as little steps as you want to. And so I can set that electronic collar, say down on an 8 on a dog trail, which is lower than a Tritronics Garmin will even go, right, or a sport dog. And I can set it down low like that, and the dog, I promise, will like that way better than the vibrate. So it's real interesting. But on that note, we use, when we collar condition, we always do it at below a 10, so lower than a Tritronics Garmin will go. But on the dog trail, we're somewhere between 6 and 10 with most dogs. I've never had one I had to go above 10 to collar condition. And I collar condition as a positive. So I teach them that when they feel that, they're going to get a reward, until they can be running around the shop and I can just hit that thing and they will come find me. You know, with no verbal, they just are like, whoa, hey, that was the dinner bell, and they come running over excited and want the treat. And it really changes the electronic experience, because now instead of it meaning bad dog, it just means, hey, pay attention, this is where you're going to get your reward, and we can build a much cleaner response. And what I found too with that is that once you've built that really clean response and they realize that electronic, you know, the e-collar is actually your physical communication to help the dog be successful, then even when you need to turn it up and use it at higher levels because the dog's listening, kind of like we hear each other in a concert, right? And so you got to raise your voice because they can't hear you with all the other noise going on. Then the reactions to that are way better, and we get, you know, none to very little blowback, as I'd refer to it, which is the real negative, you know, emotions that might come to the dog after being reprimanded with the e-collar. Instead, we can get a quick response and then rewards, and a very coachable animal that stays real happy and enthusiastic through all that. So, very good.
What do you do differently with those dogs that you're running horseback? Is it a different kind of dog? Can you take those dogs and make them a walking dog?
Yes.
There's a big difference here.
Great question. So, yeah, and I, one day I'm going to put a championship on a dog in the shoot to retrieve that I also put a championship on in the all age, because I think there's a huge misconception. In my mind, an all age dog, meaning the biggest running dog on horseback, if you guys don't, the horseback sport is broken up essentially into shooting dog or all age dog, and in general, a shooting dog is going to be, an all-age dog is the most extreme, right? And so that dog, to me, if it's going to listen and do the things I'm asking it to do and give me the chance to put on the best show I possibly can for the judges, then I need a dog that's going to listen and follow me as the leader at 800 yards. Right? So at 800, I want to be able to send literally, like if you're running in the Chucker Championship that they just held out in Oregon, I can send a dog till it is out of sight. Not because of the contour of the ground, because I can have it on a hillside, but I can send it so far that the naked eye cannot see that dog anymore. But at the end of that course, I have to hang a right or a left, and it's more than a 90 degree, right? So I got to be able to send my dog in there, and then when he's out of sight, draw him back in and get him around the corner. That takes a dog that's working with you pretty dang good. And so definitely a dog with the intelligence that I can also get off my horse and say, we're going to hunt this draw on foot for a half hour, right? And have that dog know how to do that job for me. So it's conditioning so that they understand what I'm communicating and when I want them close and when I want them far. But I foot hunt all my all-age dogs that run those big extreme ranges. But those all-age dogs, it does require an athleticism and a mindset that allows it to do that anyway, because some dogs just, they don't even realize 800 yards exists, right? They're like, well, what about all these bushes, right? Which makes a lot of sense. What about all these? Why'd you run out there if there might be a bird here? But, you know, so it takes a certain kind of mindset that says, hey, I can hunt this, but I can also see that spot way in there that you want me to go to. And so it does take a certain animal that has that. But yes, those big running dogs can learn to hunt close too.
That's what I was getting. Sometimes I get friends who ask, I can't make my dog go out further. Because I've always found I can bring a dog in anytime if they have to go out. But I haven't been able to find a way to make a dog go further.
Right. And you know, we can do things to change pattern to help them be more efficient. And as they're more efficient, that'll help a dog grab more ground because he'll say, well, I've already hunted that, I need to hunt the next place. But certain dogs, depending on how their mind works when they're hunting, that's not their ticket, right? And I've also noticed a lot of these big running dogs, you know, they're great at finding coveys, but they're not real good at singles. You know, I've had a lot of dogs like that. Sometimes I've had dogs that are great at finding coveys and also phenomenal at shutting down on a single, but that's a lot harder to find, kind of like LeBron James, right? I mean, they exist, but that's not going to be the normal. But then there's a lot of dogs that are just brilliant at the thick stuff and the singles, you know, that little single quail and the single, you know, and they might not run clear out there, but they do that job really well. And I think that's a lot of times we like to try to find the best, but the best is usually at a certain thing, right? And so, yeah, so I love all of them, but yeah, there's a lot of them that are smart enough they can play both games, at least adequately. But okay, anything else? I don't know how long they'll start kicking us out of here maybe, but I don't want to rob all your evening. But anyway, we appreciate you letting us come. Like I said, teasdoghouse.com. We actually have a promo code for you. I forgot my business cards, but if you guys wanted to check out what we have online, teasdoghouse.com, and then you go up to the sign-ups area, and if you guys use promo code PFCASH, so Pheasants Forever Cash, all capitals, then that would get you in and give you 5 days to browse around the videos and check out the website and yeah, see what we have there.
Yeah, so that'd be 5 free days before it would renew into a payment plan.
And as you go and sign up, it has a place to cancel. So you just if you don't want to go into the payment plan, then you would just cancel. It's $25 a month. You can cancel at any time. So if 5 days is all you wanted, then just make sure you cancel before the 5th day. And if you want a month, then just cancel before that month.
Do you take outside dogs?
I do take a few.
Do you give training lessons? Do you
So in that
do seminars?
Yeah, well, all of the above, but but what we do the most of has been the obedience classes as far as small group, the shaping of the mind as we refer to it. We do a lot of that, and then we will do personalized stuff, one-on-one, and I do take, in the summertime I take on bird dogs. In the rest of the season I don't, because field trialing and things make it hard to leave some dogs at the kennel and then leave for 2 weeks to go do some of those things. So the summer months I do take outside gun dogs. The family dogs we take during the winter mostly. So it's just kind of like I do some of all of it, but it fits in where our schedule will take it. And we've been doing more with the seminars, and yeah, I've had a few people reach out for traveling recently, which I don't even know how they know about me, but they found us somehow. Yeah, so we can help out in any of those ways. And this next year, I would like to set up some, I guess you'd call them seminars, but some 2 or 3 day get-togethers where we could work dogs, with the bird dog side of things, which I haven't done in the past, but this next year we would like to start doing a little bit of that, at least locally, So if you're interested, reach out to me and I'll put you on a list and let you know.
And we have the
what's going
email
on.
list on the website that if you put in your email, then we'll send out emails when we're doing seminars locally and things
Yeah.
like that too.
Yeah, we let you know when we've added new videos, because that's a changing thing all the time. The videos will stay on there, but then we do new projects, and so we'll put those up. So being on the email list, if you just went to T's Doghouse, it'll put up a thing for you to give us your email address, and then you'd get the notifications when we did have things coming up, so that you'd know what was going on. So
I'll just add to this. When you go onto the website the first time you do this, it'll ask you to put all your credit card information as if you're going to pay. It's just gathering the information they're not going to charge you as long as you put in that code. So you have those first 5 days.
yeah, and when you put in the code, it won't charge you until your 5 days are up. But then it's going to charge you. So that's why it's important that you can go in and then just cancel. And it should, if you canceled any time in that first 5 days, it'll give you the 5 days, right? It just won't. So does that make sense? So if you wanted to stay, you said, oh, well, I want one more month, then you could put 25, you know, it charges $25, then you can cancel the same day it charges $25, and it'll still let you get through the month before it stopped letting you in. Does that all make sense? And then once you've set up your account too, if there is ever a time that you're like, hey, I got an email and he loaded some new stuff I want to take a look at, you could go in for a month and you know, just start it again and then end it when you wanted it to end. So we've tried to make it pretty user friendly, but if you don't, but you need to know that it is going to naturally bill you, you know, at the month mark if you haven't gone in and canceled. So, okay, very good. Well, thanks for letting us come out. Hopefully it was of some value.